The Today in Manufacturing podcast offers a powerful and unique perspective on the biggest stories impacting U.S. manufacturers. Anna Wells, David Manty, and Jeff Ranke apply their experience as editors of industry-leading brands Manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News in providing in-depth analysis of the latest headlines. Their insight, along with a mix of humor and human interest, makes Today in Manufacturing a go-to source. Keep pace with supply chain challenges, electric vehicle developments, labor struggles, robotics, and more by listening, downloading, and subscribing to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing, a podcast where I interview young people about their journeys in manufacturing, how they intend to influence the industry, and what they are looking for from an employer. For this episode, I welcome Alexandra Bryant-Boose, a 27-year-old manufacturing automation engineer at Merck. Bryant-Boose became fascinated with manufacturing as she attended career fairs during undergrad at NC State. After earning a degree in chemical engineering with a concentration in biomolecular engineering and a double minor in microbiology and biotechnology, Bryant-Boose worked at Redbud Labs, a startup that develops microfluidic technologies. After nearly 2.5 years at Redbud Labs, Bryant-Boose transitioned to Merck and currently works as a specialist vaccine automation engineer, where her duties include preparing equipment for production, making coding updates to improve processes, and troubleshooting daily issues. Additionally, Bryant-Boose serves as a talent acquisition lead for Merck's League of Employees of African Descent and co-leads a program that educates middle and high school students about careers in STEM. Bryant-Boose was also recently named an emerging leader in manufacturing by the Manufacturing Institute's 2024 Women Make Awards. Before we hear from Bryant-Boose, please make sure to like and share this episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing. To view previous episodes, visit Manufacturing.net. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please get in touch with me, Nolan Beilstein, at nolan@in.com. Before we get started, we would like to thank our sponsor, RedZone. Empower your front line while growing your bottom line. QAD RedZone is the #1 connected workforce solution for plants of all sizes. It's time for manufacturers to start engaging their frontline employees, resulting in reduced turnover and increased productivity. RedZone enables you to stop analyzing yesterday and start solving today's problems now. For the first time ever, production, maintenance, and quality teams are following the same playbook. Alexandra, thanks again for joining us on Gen Z in Manufacturing. I wanted to open up with a question about your feature in the Manufacturing Institute. When you said you kind of stumbled on automation and compared the work to being a detective, what about automation do you think appeals to the younger workforce?
Yeah, I think I think growing up, we've all are in the age of, computers and technology coming along. And I know as a kid, I would just tinker with my computer settings, change the font, change colors, change all that fun stuff. And I think automation takes that and makes it to a bigger scale.
You said that sometimes automation is about opening up the system and getting a little dirty to find a problem. I know sometimes we hear that manufacturing is a dirty job. It has that characterization that deters Gen Z. Did that tag ever discourage you from pursuing a career in this industry?
I would say no, it didn't deter me or anything. Growing up, I grew up in the South in the country, would play with dirt. So not afraid to get a little dirty. And I would say even with our equipment, not afraid to essentially take off a back panel and just get in there with the hard hat on, safety gear, etc. Really hands-on. And I feel like although the manufacturing space, we think dirt, we think really hands-on, that was actually something that attracted me to the field.
Do you think the rest of Gen Z kind of feels that the same as you, or do you think that they kind of still associate manufacturing with that dirty stigma?
Yeah, I would say no. I think a lot of Gen Z, including some of my peers, are deterred by that stigma. And even, having peers that are a part of Gen Z as well, hearing the complaints when we have to, actually dig under a hood of something or gown up a specific way, wear our safety gear, steel toe boots, hard hat, the whole nine. I hear those complaints and I realize that not everyone is as gung-ho about working in manufacturing. And I would say that, given technology, given computers, a lot of Gen Z would prefer to just probably work behind a computer and maybe be a little less hands-on. So those two things together really, I would say, deter the generation from wanting to work in manufacturing.
How do you think Gen Z could influence automation design as more of them enter the workforce?
Yeah, I think it's a little hard because automation isn't something that's taught in school. A lot of folks like myself discover it by happenstance, either after college, um, or, when they're looking for a job post undergrad. And I think it's hard to say how they can influence based on that. Um, I definitely think once, Gen Z gets into the field and actually sees it, they can advocate for providing more training, providing more somewhat knowledge base of automation to say their younger peers.
As manufacturing employers bring in these younger workers, what kind of mentorship should they be providing?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Um, I guess I'll start personally with myself. Coming into Merck post my first job after undergrad, um, this was my first corporate sort of structured job. I worked before at a startup, and I immediately jumped into a mentorship program when I got into Merck, and that allowed for me to one, learn the ropes of what having a corporate job not at a startup was like, but also just learn the ropes of automation and having someone there that I could lean on. One, if I got stuck work wise, or two, if I just needed advice. And I think Gen Z could really use that mentorship, especially given, some people went through the COVID era, kind of are used to the remote hybrid work life. And I think having a mentor who may have been in the field a lot longer, may not be used to that, maybe more used to coming into the office more versus the remote hybrid work, could definitely help influence them, just career wise, but also in whatever field they choose to go into.
And as a woman in a field traditionally dominated by men, what kind of mentorship did you receive as a student or professional that you think made the biggest impact?
Yeah, so I've kind of just grabbed on to people as I've met them throughout Merck. And luckily, there are a lot of women at Merck, who have years of experience and who have kind of taken me under their wing to provide advice. As you just mentioned, it's a very male dominated field, manufacturing as a whole. And I think having women who are mentors who I can bounce ideas off, bounce situations that I'm going through, definitely helps. Whether that be how I should handle, how an interaction went during a meeting, or how I should maybe respond to an email, to where I don't, come across as a certain way. I definitely think having those mentors has really helped me navigate, how to get my footing, in this field.
And obviously, it's nice for a woman to have another woman to mentor them, but how do you think men can encourage more women to join manufacturing and make them feel more included and welcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do have a lot of great women mentors, but I also have a lot of men who are great mentors, especially here at Merck. And I would say hearing the takes and getting bouncing off those same ideas that I would bounce off to my women mentors to men mentors allows for me to see just the difference in thinking. Um, and that kind of helps me to internally say, okay, how should I respond to a certain thing, for the audience that I'm trying to respond to? And I would say one way that men can kind of help more women get into the field is just, promoting diversity and inclusion. I think seeing whether it be at career fairs or, any other outings where a company may go where they're trying to recruit new members, having that representation really matters. And I mean that can be whether it be a man or a woman leading those efforts. Just making sure that representation is included definitely can help.
And as they're promoting that diversity, what can they do to make it seem genuine? A lot of companies promote diversity and then you just kind of go, everyone says that. So how do they make theirs seem pure and genuine?
Yeah, I think Merck does a really good job at tapping into everyone's potential. If I advocate for myself and say, hey, this is where I want to be a year from now, managers have definitely helped me get to that point. Um, but I think Merck does a really good job specifically of helping everyone, regardless of, race, sex, gender, of getting to where they want to go. And not always choosing who, may look the best, but, who's the best fit for the job. And I think that we do a good job in doing that, which ultimately does a good job in helping with our diversity. I guess another thing to add to that, You mentioned being genuine with diversity and inclusion. We have a lot of employee business resource groups, which we have groups that are for individuals to feel welcomed, and they all have corporate sponsors that may not essentially belong to that group. So, for instance, we have LEAD, League of Employees of African Descent, which is an organization I'm a part of, that are for Black or members of or employees who have African descent. We also have a group for the LGBTQ plus community. We have a veterans network. We have all of these groups that really that Merck really fosters and encourages people to get involved in, to which I would say one makes it known that they're genuine with their efforts, but two allows for people to kind of have a place to go, to feel comfortable with like-minded individuals.
Yeah, I want to talk a little more about your Merck's League of Employees of African Descent. What kind of work do you do as a talent acquisition lead for that group?
Yeah, so a lot of my work has been focused in the K through 12 space, which is essentially doing boots on the ground STEM outreach at local schools. A lot of the materials that have been developed through both lead as well as being our site's STEM outreach co-lead has been used at other sites. Merck has a site in Rahway, New Jersey, where we've used our materials, as well as a site in West Point, Pennsylvania, where we've used the materials. And it's really about getting out there, getting that face-to-face interaction with kids who may not have the opportunity traditionally to get that face-to-face interaction with a large company. And in addition to a large company, the intention is to influence kids. Granted, they're sometimes as young as 6, 7, 8, but to kind of leave that long lasting impact with them of, hey, like, this girl from Merck came and taught me what manufacturing is and, helped me make slime. But it's having that long lasting impact to hopefully influence someone to go into STEM in the future.
I also read that this group gives younger workers the opportunity to reverse mentor executives. What kind of advice does the younger generation usually give those superiors?
Yeah, so I will say specifically with a mentor that I had, she was an associate director at a different site, and when me and her would converse and talk, it would be me bouncing ideas off about situations that I'm going through, but also her just learning how I've been developing my own career, what tools she can take, even having 15 plus years experience on me. What advice she can take and what decisions she can take to help with her career, as well as how she can take what I'm doing and take what I'm learning from her and apply that to her team members. And I would say that reverse mentoring aspect definitely differs from pair to pair, but that's kind of what we've gotten out of it as a whole.
And going back to your mentorship program for students, I know we're not too much older than some of these kids that you talk to, but what has surprised you about that age group as you expose them to STEM careers?
Yeah, I would say one thing when speaking to students is I like to get them very engaged. And our goal, it would be wonderful if kids grew up and wanted to get in pharma and even come to Merck. But our goal is to just let them know about STEM as a whole. So when going through STEM careers, one thing I like to highlight is say video game development or say even a meteorologist. And in doing this, I get the students engaged. So I say, hey, how many of you play video games? And not shockingly, all of their hands goes up. And it's very interesting to hear, what kind of games they play, but also being able to tell them, what they could do as a video game developer in the future. And I would say the most shocking thing is that when you can relate to a kid and speak their language, how that much more interested they become in what you have to say. I will say, sometimes we'll go into really into depth about manufacturing and opportunities in pharma, and sometimes I can see the moment we lose them, but we're always able to bring them back with things that are more relatable.
What is that Gen Z language that employers need to learn to speak?
Yeah, that's a little hard. I think that Gen Z, and being Gen Z, we are a lot more relaxed. And I think that as the last generation, as the last Gen Z group is starting to funnel into the workplace, you can definitely tell that even then there's somewhat of a gap between older Gen Z and younger Gen Z. But I think being a little more less formal, there's definitely still a level of professionalism that needs to be kept. But there's also a way to communicate to your audience and kind of know your audience and be a little more, not going to say relaxed or even chill, but be a little more less formal while still remaining professional.
What do you notice as a more glaring issue while you're promoting these STEM careers, that the younger generation isn't interested in the careers or that they're not even aware of them?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think they're not aware, and some of these kids are middle or high schoolers and they say know what a doctor is, but they may not know what a phlebotomist is. And it's like letting them know that, hey, there's more to being a doctor, that you can be a surgeon, you can be an anesthesiologist, you can be a phlebotomist. They don't know, they just know the surface level of what you can do in some of these careers. And I think that sometimes explaining, hey, this is what you can do, these are the opportunities you have, definitely gets them interested. But I think there's just a gap in, what they're exposed to and what they may know versus, all the careers that are actually out there.
What critiques have you heard from your peers in similar industries regarding diversity in the workplace?
I would say I know, just, I guess, to be very honest, one thing I've noticed is I'm a Black female, that there may not be a lot of Black, say, engineers. And I think that isn't necessarily, say, a Merck or a corporate thing, but it's that a lot of Black individuals don't go into the engineering field. So I think a lot of lack of diversity isn't necessarily on the company, but more so the fact that there's just not a lot of people going into these fields. And even taking it back to undergrad, I went to NC State for chemical engineering, and out of a class of, say, 100 of us, there would be maybe 20 women. And if we look at the number of Black individuals or minorities, the number would be even less. So I think it's just that there isn't, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I just don't think that, that there's a lot to work with when it comes to candidate pool, just because we go back to undergrad and college and there aren't a lot of people that, went down that path.
Is there a way that manufacturing employers can attract more diversity in that way?
I would say start at the high school level. We know a lot of colleges have career fairs. And I mean, I've been to several career fairs in my undergraduate career, as well as, being in the professional world. And it's like when you go, you see the manufacturing companies, you see all of the big name companies, and that's great because college students know, what it is they have to offer and what it is on their plate. But some of these kids are juniors or seniors in college, and it's kind of past the point of, oh, maybe I should major in X, Y, and Z to get to XYZ field. And I think if you can start at the high school level, maybe a grassroots approach, boots on the ground approach, and kind of get the student's ear and say, hey, if you go chemical engineering, you can work in all of these industries and do all of these jobs, that would definitely help to set kids up for success post even getting into college, but post undergrad.
Thank you for watching this episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing. Please make sure to like and share the episode. To watch or listen to previous episodes, go to manufacturing.net and click on the Gen Z tab. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please contact Nolan Beilstein at nolan@ien.com.